you really can't open up the doors to learning without this ability to read.
Hey everyone, my name is Kyle Wallgren, and yes, this is another episode of the Business of Education. Today I get to talk to a very exciting guest who's focused on literacy, not just literacy as a whole, but globally she's making an impact in literacy. Today our guest is Dr. Catherine A. Honeyman, is a passionate entrepreneur and global expert in education and youth development. She is founder of Bombo Books. Did I say that right?
Sounds good.
Bombo Books, a vibrant community in Rwanda that fosters learning and empowers youth. Katie work spans the globe, transforming early literacy and workforce opportunities. She plays a key role in shaping, innovating education solutions. Her mission is to empower youth, inspire learning, and drive meaningful change in education worldwide. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here.
I appreciate you jumping on. I know it's nighttime where you're at, so thank you for being flexible. What inspired you to get into education with your career and most importantly, literacy?
I was trying to prepare for this discussion and reflecting a little bit on that. And I think most people, our stories are not very linear. I actually got into this area as a young person, but after having already spent a while focusing on conflict issues, conflict, human rights violations, peace building. And actually that it was here in Rwanda that I first became interested in education as a different tool of social transformation, a different kind of peace building tool. So that's the origin of it. I was here studying a post-conflict judicial system, and in the evening spending time with people who were, in informal education program. They were studying a lot of profound questions about what does it mean to be a human being? What do we really want to do with our lives? And I found those education interactions, even though they were non-formal outside of a school, but they had so much more power, it looked like to me as a young person, to transform things, to lead to some kind of lasting change. So I started to try to learn more about education systems here and then eventually in other countries too.
That your answer really hit me hard. I didn't grow up in education. I thought that I was the furthest thing from education. I hated school. But when 2020 hit and I saw all the chaos and confusion and people not really knowing how to ask the right questions, I wanted to ask myself why. And from my research, I felt like the literacy rate in America had a big impact on how people understood everybody. And I thought that if we could just increase literacy, primarily focused on the United States to start with, that we could make the world a more peaceful place. You'd be able to understand people's opinions, be able to dissect why somebody might have the opinion they have based off of what they're going through, where they're located, what their upbringing looks like, and respect them for that instead of just, attacking them for thinking different than yourself.
I think literacy teaches empathy, depending on what you read. But if you read widely, it teaches empathy.
It really does. And so you're the first person that said that and that really aligned with my mission and why I came into literacy. I was a non-reader is what I guess I'd classify myself with. I probably, before I got into Edsoma, might have read at a grade 2 or 3 reading level. Although I've had success, reading was something that I struggled with, and it just, so thank you so much for sharing that mission with me. Can you share a specific moment, and you did just touch on one, but that really impacted you with how early literacy could affect your community and help with programs around that?
Yeah. So I didn't begin my career in education focusing on literacy. I actually focused on non-formal education, young people, alternative ways to get a secondary school education. But sometime later, I started a consulting firm here, and a lot of the research I was asked to do was on early literacy programming. And I saw just how powerful this is for children and for the parents who are sometimes reading for the first time with their child, that they're being encouraged to bring that home,
Yes.
that culture of reading home. So that raised my own interest, because I really agree with you that we really can't open up the doors to learning without this ability to read. So I started to look more at that fundamental level. And I dreamt with my children about how could we make books more available to people. As a young mother myself, with I have three children. My first child,
Mm-hmm.
I was living here in Kigali, and I had a lot of trouble getting access to books. Um, Even though at the time people were really working on that and building a publishing industry here, they just weren't very available. They were expensive for me at the time. So I'd been dreaming and thinking about what to do about that. And more recently, we started to share, now I have three children. I've acquired a really great collection of books, thanks to my parents, among other people. And it seemed strange for them to just be sitting in our home. We all read, but how many books do we really read a month out of the library I have here in the other room? And it felt strange to just have them in our house. So one day, a couple of years ago, during the National Literacy Month here, I decided to take a selection and hand them out to the kids that live around us. And when I went out onto the street, we live on this dirt road here. It's a really very mixed income neighborhood with, people who work in NGOs and alongside people who are food insecure and don't know where their next meal is coming from. And there's a ton of kids always out on the street playing football, playing soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought out these books. And when they saw me, because they all know me, they've known me for a long time, when they saw me coming out with the books, they literally stopped their soccer game and came up to me to ask if they could have a book to read. And then they sat down on the side of this dirt road with their friends reading a book. And so I felt like the value that I give to books is not just me. They're also hungry for them. They really wanted to have access to these materials. And it's really powerful to watch a group of young boys stop their soccer game to read. So that's one of the things that really motivated me and kind of made me think that the ideas that I had could have value to some other people in this neighborhood too.
I think people really don't, maybe, obviously my experience is different than yours. I'm in the United States, and although we do share some of the same problems, it's not maybe at scale or maybe as not as noticeable, the way that we hide it in the United States. But that joy that reading can pass on to kids is something that really can shake your soul. The world's so chaotic, and to be able to separate yourself for a moment by diving into a book and being 100% immersed in that story is so powerful. Some of my fondest memories was when my grandmother would read books to me as a child, and I can still remember that. And when I think of what was maybe those most special moments that I shared with my grandmother was those moments, being able to listen to the story and envision what that would be like, whether it was the Jungle Book or, The Outsiders or whatever that book was just so powering to be able to dream for a moment. And I think that we need to make sure that we don't lose that, especially as technology advances, to be able to step back and just immerse yourself and get lost in a dream or somebody else's dream, just to inspire you. It's such a powerful thing. So thank you so much. Bombo, and I know that I butchered that. Tell me a little bit about that. What you guys are doing there.
Sure. It's Bombo Books.
Bombo,
Bombo is
sorry.
the word for candy in Kinyarwanda.
Oh, wow.
It's from
I
the
like
French bonbon, like a piece of candy.
Oh, okay. Now I'm going to get it. So when you mentioned that, I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so
but now I do.
the idea was, first of all, it's a social enterprise, but it's also like an action research question that I have about the world. Can you create a self-sustaining community library? What does that look like? How does it sustain itself? Um, Rwanda actually has about 30 community libraries around the country, but that number hasn't really grown a lot. And many of them are run by churches or NGOs. They need funding. So my question was, could my neighborhood have a library? Could it sustain itself as a business actually alongside the library function, so that I can pay a couple of young people to be there and to help people get the books they want to read and serve as another kind of educational institution in this neighborhood. Yeah, so I kind of started. We had a bunch of experiments before we got to that. We had I think more than 6 months of lending books to kids in the neighborhood from our house. We have a bunch of kids who come over on Sundays for some lessons that we teach here. And at the end of the lesson, we'd give each of them a book and send it home. And miraculously, almost all of them would come back next week with the kids. They'd bring their books back. But you could tell that in the intervening days, they had been passed around to another dozen or maybe 2 or 3 dozen kids. So they were getting well used, let's say. And by the end of the 6 months, the collection was almost in tatters. So second, I thought, well, could I convince this guy who runs a little corner shop down the street, could I convince him to have some books and let some kids sit in his shop and read them? Because he had a little plastic table and 3 plastic chairs for the guys who wanted to drink beer there. So I thought, okay, that's a sitting area that could have some kids in there. So it was a tough sell. He said, if the kids are in here, I can't watch all my merchandise. They're going to distract me. There's going to be way too many of them, because he knew actually that they would love to read if they got the chance. Eventually, I convinced him, since he wouldn't do a library, I convinced him to sell some books on consignment. So I just gave him a bunch of books that I had. And I said, if you manage to sell these at a very, very low price of like 50 cents to $1 each, then you can pay me back a portion of that. Let's see. Like, I wanted to earn his trust and belief in this.
Right.
So he was like, okay. And he put them way up in his very crowded, tiny shop with every kind of merchandise you could imagine. He put them way up somewhere on a shelf. And in the first week, he still sold maybe 10 books, because we put a post out in the neighborhood and people said, where is that place? I want to get something for my kids at that price that they could afford. But, it wasn't his core business, so he didn't really keep working on it and promoting them. And after a little while, it just kind of died down and the books were sitting there up in an invisible corner of his shelf. So I thought, okay, that was my second experiment. What can we do next? And that's when we thought it's time we could try to start this as our own little shop library. And the reason why it's called Bombo Books is because Bombo, a candy here, usually costs around 100 Rwandan francs, which now is maybe 80, 90 cents. And that is the amount of money a parent is willing to give to their child and send them to the shop to buy a piece of candy. So that's what a child can control in their life. So we thought, okay, let's make this shop about that idea that reading is just as sweet as having a piece of candy. And also, if you're going to buy your child a piece of candy, why not give them an hour reading a book instead? Or you can do both. So we made this library that has bookshelves, and we always have the covers facing out so you can see how beautiful this book is. It looks like some candy. It looks like a toy. It's just gorgeous when you look at the covers.
Right.
And alongside it, we have some books for sale. We have some study materials, and we have a lot of candy. We have toys. We have soda. We have snacks. So it's a place, the idea was this is a place where people can spend time and enjoy it. And they can access reading for enjoyment and for learning if they want to. So yeah, we created that space. Can't remember your original question, but that's my story.
No, that's awesome. The how are you seeing the community, adopt it and accept it? Like, walk us through the growth, and that's got to be super inspiring from the first child walking into, how many children you have today.
Yeah, yeah, really. I think in the first month, we happened to open in a month of a school break, and everybody was
Mm-hmm.
here. It was a short school break, and I was just astounded in that first month. We track how many books I read and a few other things. So in that first month, we had over 500 books read, and I was
Oh
thinking to
wow.
myself, if these were still in my house, maximum 30, right? Because we read to our youngest every day. But I felt really good to see that those books had gotten a lot more use being in this separate space where somebody could really facilitate access to them. Um, yeah, and at our 6 months anniversary, we had 1,750 books read. We have regular members. We have parents who give a monthly membership to their kids. We we try to make it as affordable as possible, and we have a bunch of kids in the neighborhood with free memberships too. But it's kind
Right.
of giving it just that little bit of value. That idea that
Yeah,
if
enough to
they,
help the expense.
yeah, they're making a contribution that I think also commits you a little bit to using it. So
Do you guys have access to technology, or is there internet in your where you guys are?
their very kind church next door has lent us their Wi-Fi, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not a tech-enabled shop. We don't have like e-readers and things like that. I did just recently put an old laptop gifted to me by my father. My parents, by the way, have been big supporters in this whole thing, so thanks to them if they watch this. But he gifted me an old laptop, and that we used to download every single textbook for every subject and every grade so that at any time a child can come in and study if they want to. Because in the schools right now, although Rwanda has made huge efforts to supply schools with teaching and learning materials, at this point in time, there's a big gap. A lot of the books have been used up and not replaced yet. So kids are going through multiple years of schooling without actually having a textbook in their hands. So I'm hoping that the laptop can give them some access so they can read for themselves in whichever subject they're trying to review.
Well, if your guys' bandwidth would promote it, Edsoma would love to send you guys a laptop with our program on it. It's We have over 1,000 books active right now live, and it helps a guided reading program. And I'd love to send you a laptop and access to a subscription
That's
for your
amazing.
kids to be able to come and enjoy that.
That's
We can
amazing.
talk more about it
I have to tell
after the
you
show, but I
something.
just
Did you know that Soma means read in Kinyarwanda?
I did not know that.
Yes, Soma.
I did not know that. When we came up with that's so interesting. Um, in what language?
In the Rwandan national language, Kinyarwanda. Kinyarwanda. Good
I'm gonna
coincidence.
definitely look into that. It's 100% a coincidence. When I told you briefly that I just didn't want my kids to go through the same burden of not being able to read as I did, and that was ultimately why I did this. It was never supposed to be anything more than something that my kids would use through COVID, and it just after seeing the impact of how literacy affects so many Americans, I was just like, this is something that I need to do, and I felt like maybe God had put this on my place because he knew I was stubborn enough to not quit, and that this was going to be something big and challenging, and that most people just walk away from these extremely challenging things that they're trying to overcome. So to me, it became addicting just trying to help. You know what I mean? And uh, the, I'm a true believer that literacy changes lives 100%. When I came up with the idea, Ed's a little character. This is a keychain. I'm not sure if you can see it, but
Yeah.
he's a little cheetah. My daughter's favorite pet was a cheetah, so we went with the cheetah for do that. And then when I started looking at the cheetah, I'm like, this guy really reminds me of Toys R Us, which kind of disappeared for a few years, but it was a store that I grew
Yeah,
up as a
me
child
too.
that everybody knew of, right? And my goal with branding the company is like, how, if you look at the biggest companies in the world, what have they done successfully to continue to grow their businesses? And it was to build trust.
Mm.
Their customers trusted them. And uh, Amazon was a bookstore at first. They were the world's largest online bookstore before they were ever what we know it to be today. And when they were doing their product testing, they didn't want to damage the brand of Amazon. So they started a marketplace that was called something totally different, same owners, different name, and it failed.
Mm.
And when they started looking at why, it was because their customers didn't have trust in the brand. So I wanted to really start with trust. And I know that studies show that companies like Disney um, build this lifelong following because it impacts a child at their earliest memories. So how do we build trust with children to be able to grow with them
Yeah.
their entire lives? And it was by bringing them value, something they could be excited about early on. So Edsoma stands for Education Social Marketplace.
Oh.
When we did it, we wanted to be able to provide education to kids and then be able to teach them um, how social and society and social media was going to affect them
Mm.
as they grow,
Mhm.
because our world becomes more addicted to social media more and more every day, and it can be a very toxic place. So I just wanted to be able to prepare kids for the toxicity that they're going to experience as an adult. And then the marketplace, we haven't launched it yet, but it's there to design to help teachers with resources,
Yeah.
because we understand that a lot of teachers are having to pull money out of their own pockets to be able to expand and bring value to their classroom, because for some reason the government just doesn't believe it's important enough to make sure there's a proper amount of funding there, and we all know that it is. So Edsoma for us was Education Social Marketplace, but that's really inspiring to know that it actually did mean
Yeah. That's
reading.
true.
That's super cool. Some of the things that you're doing, you focus on youth employment, entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and these are major global challenges. What are some of the innovations and strategies you've worked with to bring entrepreneurship, especially in youth, to countries like Rwanda and surrounding countries?
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you pulled from my bio the other side of what I do, I think, which is this entrepreneurship and youth opportunities, really. And even Bombo Books connects to this because it's designed as a positive youth development business. It's
Mm-hmm.
a social enterprise. It's a youth employment opportunity. We've hosted an intern, um, and if I can make it a model that's profitable, the plan is for it to grow into a network. I would like it to show that young people can actually run this as a business for themselves, and that they can even borrow from a stock of books to make this work in at least 10 other locations. So that's part of the vision, really, is thinking about social opportunities that can be made more accessible to young people, and really can serve their interest and their desire to contribute something. Um, so I think this is just an area I've been interested in for a long time. It's something I wrote a book about it here in Rwanda, about youth entrepreneurship here. So I spent a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time with ordinary young people and the businesses they had tried to create, which were, selling grilled maize from the roadside, selling telephone airtime, selling chickens and their eggs, doing a little corner shop just like the one I have. So those are the kind of opportunities that are available here, but not accessible to every young person and not necessarily that growth oriented. So taking that, they call it here an ichiraka, just a little job, right? Taking that little income generating thing and making it into something that they can feel proud of and that grows and
Mm-hmm.
that's done something for the people who live around them. Um, that's one area that I'm really interested in. And I've worked on that in a few countries now, but this is the place I know the best at this point.
Right. For me, and this is, I'm biased when I say this, but I feel like the majority of the best entrepreneurs in the world come from some sort of impoverished area. They didn't grow up with the best of everything, and they wanted something to be better, different, a different life for their family. And they go out and they understand what hard work is because they've had to do it from such a very early age.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's one of the things I work on as a parent. I'm a lot more fortunate today than where my mom was raising us. And I know that my work ethic came from not being able to go to the store and buy new things. You know what I mean? I had to make do with what I had and be creative and how to make it last and how to utilize it in different opportunities. And as a parent, I want to make sure that my kids have that same ability, right? I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah. That's a big
take too much away
responsibility.
from them
That's a big responsibility we
by
have as adults. I think if the majority of adults thought about what they could do to give a skill to their own children or some kids living around them, we would be in a different situation. I have these images in my mind of places that I've worked where you can just see crowds of young people sitting around most of the day because they simply do not have an avenue to put their skills to work, or they don't have the skills needed to make a contribution because school maybe didn't provide that kind of practical skill that they needed in any domain, not even any kind of
right.
domain. So I think it's part of our responsibilities, and even running, this little business we're talking about is a hobby for me. I have a very demanding full-time job on the side of it, but part of the reason of doing the hobby is to give my kids a chance to experience something outside of school and home life. My husband and I really wanted them to have that exposure. So my son is my inventory manager. He's technically classified as an apprentice because he's 13 and not legal working age. Believe me, I don't stress him out. But he's responsible for changing. Every week we put 50 new books in the shop, so people see different things all the time. That's his responsibility. My daughter, who's 10, was our design advisor. So she helped us with the colors that should be used in the logos. And so I just think, we have to give kids and young people exposure to the work that we do because that's how they discover who they are and what they could contribute to society. Um, so I think, yeah, what you're talking about is really important. We have to give those opportunities to our own kids and to somebody outside the family if possible.
Yeah. And, as parents, you always want to be able to provide more than what you grew up with. But I think that comes at a risk. Um, if we over provide, what kind of life are they actually going to have? Maybe their life might be okay, but then what do they pass on to their children, right? Because that work ethic might not necessarily be there, or they might feel totally entitled. And then all of a sudden, the people that created that wealth for that family are no longer there. It's just a big thing that I definitely try and think about very thoroughly every day when I'm trying to give things to my kids or make them responsible uh, for the tasks at hand. When working with youth, what are some of the most rewarding things that you've got to see? Not just through the bookstore, but what you do for a full-time job.
Um, I think when a young person finds their place and sees what they can offer, that's the reward. Um, we have programs, soft skills development programs, technical and vocational education and training, other higher education opportunities that we offer to young people, and then just connecting them, convincing businesses to hire young people, to be willing to hire somebody without experience, because that's often the biggest barrier. Every job requires at least 1 year of experience. So
Right.
where do you get your foot in the door, especially in an economy where there aren't these low paying jobs that they're willing to give to high school students, right? There's no extra work here, so it's adults who get the jobs. So how do you give them that foot in the door? I see that it's really rewarding to see them no longer caught in limbo because they're often stuck, they're no longer children, but they're living a life that is also not fully adult because they don't have a means to earn their own livelihood. They haven't found their place in our society and economy. I'm really inspired when we see them find that spot. And the young people that work for me have shown that, because they come in, they don't have necessarily a great background of great education or a lot of opportunity, but they are so smart and they've improved this social enterprise so much. It's really in their hands, the running of this, and to make it, to know how to grow it for this neighborhood. It's in their hands. So I hope and I believe that they see themselves as leading this kind of miniature social transformation in this area of the city.